welcome to State of the State. I'm John Carlevale, and our guest for this interview is Richard August, AKA Host August on State of the State. But today he is our guest, and we're going to be talking about a number of things, some of which relate to what has happened subsequent to the confirmation of Mr. Trump as our president. So, Dick, let's talk a little bit about his inaugural address and how you saw it. I mean, some people are saying it had darkness to it. Some people say not so much. So, well, what do you think? You saw it.
I frankly thought it was a little bit dark. I thought that he came across somewhat bellicose, I guess, but I think he set the tone for this term. And I think, John, there's a difference now. Donald Trump, this is his second rodeo. And the first time he had to figure out how things work in Washington. Now he knows. I think Donald Trump also knows that he has a limited time, 2 years at the most, to get some of these initiatives done, some of these changes made to bring America back to what he calls greatness and being an exceptional country. And he's not wasting any time. And the speed with which he is working, making appointments, getting out there, making statements and so forth, it's just astounding, some of these people, that he's moving. And for a man of his age, compared to what we had for the last 4 years, I don't know if he ever sleeps or when he sleeps, because he's constantly going in all directions, goes to North Carolina and California the same day. And, you know, he's doing a fantastic job. And this time around, I think there's a difference in the tone of he's not mincing any words. And the people that he has surrounded himself with this time, namely a guy like Pete Hegseth, who's been narrowly confirmed as the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, so Dick, so let's talk about some of those controversial.
Yeah, well, I listened to his speech after he was sworn in by the Vice President. And I told you that 3 retired generals who I know had all expressed concern about his lack of experience to manage this bureaucracy. Maybe he's a breath of fresh air, because he's looking at this thing and he's talking more about the warrior ethos that has to prevail in the Defense Department. And this is not a place for a laboratory for social experiments. This is a place where we fight and win our nation's wars. And we only fight the wars that we have a purpose to be there. And this is somewhat different. The person that he has acting as his press person, she's the same way. She came right out and she said, pulls no punches about what's happening on the border. And this Tom Homan that he's calling the border czar, tough ex-New York cop.
Yes.
He's not fooling around. He says, look, these people are here illegally. They're criminals. If they violate, we're going after those people first, as you and I said in our last talk. They're going back. And some of these people that are interviewing him are aghast. What do you mean? He goes to Congress, and Congressman AOC says, Congresswoman AOC goes, oh, you could breaking up families again. And he says, look, he said, when I was a cop in New York, if I went into a home where there was domestic violence, we took the violence of the guy out and separated the families. If I picked up somebody for DUI and they had kids in the car, they were still separated. I arrested the father, and some arrangements had to be made for the children. Mm-hmm. These people are here illegally. They've broken the law in coming into this country. And that, they're very plain spoken. They're not making any false gestures about what's going on. The fact that he's sending our military to the borders is not unusual. The United States Army, for much of the time after the Civil War, spent its time patrolling the border with Mexico. Mm-hmm. To keep out not only the Indians that were raiding, but also the Mexican banditos that were coming across raiding and stealing cattle and everything else. So this isn't not unprecedented.
Dick, I'm always, dumbfounded when people, say, well, that's not right to do. they're not here legally. What's not right about it?
Well, clearly they broke the law when they came across the border the way they did. Now, Representative Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, said she's calling these people asylees. And so this is a take on the word refugees, but asylum is a very different thing than being a refugee.
Yes.
When you come in as grounds for asylum is not, I want a better life for my family. That's the grounds to be a refugee and apply for refugee status. Yes. Saying I'm really worried about the crime in my country is not grounds for asylum. Asylum means you can demonstrate there's a very real threat against your life in the country where you are. And so what has happened is these groups have flooded our system so that people claiming asylum, it takes years for them to be heard in a court to determine whether or not they're asylum. And the fact is that up to now, 90% of the people claiming to be asylees don't qualify. 90%. And there are some that don't even show for.
They disappear. They vanish.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So there's a different I think a different tenure tone to this second Trump candidacy or presidency, I should say. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. There's going to be some changes. There's already changes being made. The commanding woman who was the commanding officer of the U.S. Coast Guard was relieved of command, 4-star admiral, by Homeland Security. They don't come under the Department of Defense. Most people think they do, but they're under Homeland Security. And he cited 5 reasons why she was being relieved of her command. And 2 Navy captains were shortly relieved just recently from their positions on the West Coast. And a captain is the equivalent of a colonel in the Air Force or the Army or the Marine Corps. So they're fairly high-ranking officers, and there was reasons given for their removal. Now this is shocking.
Well, Dick, I think that's worth repeating because they were dismissed with cause.
Yep.
Not
just
arbitrarily
randomly
done.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to that we citizens know that. Because certainly it's understandable that people would be upset if they just moved someone out for no good purpose at all.
Sure.
But that doesn't seem to be the case. Might it happen from time to time? Probably yes.
Yeah. Well, in the military, of course, if you get passed over for promotion 2 times in a row, when you go before a promotion board, you're out anyway. Now, I believe there are certain exceptions, and this is why the Defense Department has become such a bloated bureaucracy that seems to be unable to get off the dime. One congressman I heard said he thinks the defense budget should be doubled.
Doubled?
Doubled, because we're so far behind the other nations. And I'm thinking, we're spending, the latest appropriation is $900 billion. We're approaching $1 trillion, and the Defense Department cannot pass an audit. There are billions of dollars. They have no idea where it's going. They don't even know really how many people they have as contractors. When they're asked, can you tell us what the true head count is? Both your people that are there and contractors that are, well, we call them gig workers in private industry, can't tell you. They don't know. So this is kind of frightening when you think about it. And if Hegseth gets in there and he says, I'm demanding this accountability, that's a good thing for us, not a bad thing.
It is a good thing. Yes, it is, Dick. There's no question. Do you want to talk a little bit more about some of his appointees, or do you want to get on to some other stuff?
Well, I think certainly Marco Rubio sailed through as Secretary of State. So really, probably the 2 most powerful cabinet positions are Defense and State, along with Treasury. So he's got those in place. I think there's still going to be opposition to Pam Bondi for Attorney General, and certainly RFK Jr. for HHS. And Big Pharma is, for whatever lobbying very heavily against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. Again, there's opposition to her. Now, she's a decorated military veteran, and why people are upset is really not clear to me, but there are people that seem to be hell-bent on throwing roadblocks in Trump's attempts to bring his administration, get it up to running 100%. So we'll see what happens on those.
Dick, I want to ask you a question, which you probably know the answer to, but I don't seem to recall such resistance offered in past times when a president new coming in had appointees.
Yeah, I think there probably, if we go back in history, there's probably been some cases of that, but typically the idea is the president, unless there's some real problem with someone, the Senate maybe interviews these people and goes along with the president because these are the people the president wants working for him. This is really somewhat unusual. Maybe it's not unprecedented, but it's certainly unusual that they're looking at all these people. The issues they raised with Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, the Democrats kept hammering on his marital life, his marital problems, his drinking possibilities, and all this other stuff. And a lot of the stuff was from unattributed sources. We heard that, but they kept hammering on the thing. This is not what it should be. I mean, we certainly could look at past presidents and find that some have had a few little problems with either drinking or sexual activities outside of their marriage.
Yes, indeed.
So we don't have to get into that.
Some of those presidents have hold high honor
yes.
among the presidents that have served this nation.
Yeah. So so I think it's going to be unusual. I think there's some concern that, well, I have a somewhat of a concern. As you know, I'm very much interested in what's taking place in the Middle East and Ukraine, but the people and Trump has come out and said he's supported the so-called ceasefire in Israel in Gaza. He has appointed Marco Rubio. The UN ambassador is Elise Stefanik, and the ambassador to Israel is Mike Huckabee. All three of these people are very pro-Zionist and very much will support Bibi Netanyahu or Benjamin Netanyahu as a prime minister and what he's trying to do. But I think a lot of people are very unaware of what's going on. The ceasefire is not a ceasefire at all. It is a pause in the fighting so hostages can be exchanged. The first hostages to be released were 4 female Israeli army personnel, soldiers, who were called the border watchers.
Yes.
They were the women on the border on October 7th who were taken as hostage. However, they had been saying for several days, telling headquarters that there was some activity taking place, and they were told to stand down. They were taken as hostage. They came out neatly dressed. They appeared to be clean, well-fed, taken care of. And after they were exchanged, when they were under control of the Red Cross and going into the field, they were smiling, they were happy, they were doing thumbs up. They said, in fact, one of them was quoted as saying they wanted to thank their captors for protecting them during Israeli bombardments. Now, some people can say, well, that's only because that was for show and whatever, but let's see. The idea that all these people are being mistreated and so forth may be far from the truth. But the other fact is, when that hostage exchange, or they were exchanged or brought out, Hamas has been resurrected. There are ranks and ranks of soldiers, well-armed soldiers, physically fit soldiers, standing on line.
And we saw that
Yes.
when those 4 women were released.
Yes.
And I looked at that and said, I mean, they all were carrying these big guns.
They're carrying,
holy mackerel.
Absolutely. And so this idea that, okay, we've eliminated Hamas is far from the truth. In addition to that, I was listening to a British former ambassador to the Middle East from England, from Great Britain, now retired, but he's very familiar with a lot of these people. And he said, number one, over 1 million Gazans or Palestinians, whatever you want to call them, have already started returning to the northern section, which has been devastated by the Israelis. And they said, this is our homeland, we're not going to be moved out of here. So if the, excuse me, as the fighting resumes, what is Israel going to do? Are they going to start killing these people that say, we're here this is because this is where we live? And this gentleman also said, and there was a tape of a gentleman named David Levy, who is I believe he's a newsman in Israel, and he's talking about the fact Netanyahu's government is in very deep trouble. The hard right Zionist movement in Israel wants all of the Palestinians moved out of Gaza and that area to be populated by Jewish settlers. They want to take all the Palestinians out of the West Bank and populate it with, they call this the Greater Israel Movement. Netanyahu has to rely on them for his coalition cabinet. And if things are not going the right way, it's very likely that he will be out. But he can't afford to be out because he's under indictment for fraud, or bribery, I guess, or some sort of fraudulent activity before this whole thing started. So it's a very tangled web.
Indeed it is.
And some of the people in the areas, Israel said they were going to pull out of that area of southern Lebanon that they occupy. They haven't, but yet the Lebanese are coming back in and saying, we belong here.
Well, you know, Dick, when I hear you say what you've just said, I can't help wonder whether we are going to be pulled into some of this conflict. I got the impression that Trump wanted to get us out quickly.
Well, it's very easy to get us out. All he has to do is say, we're not giving you any more munitions. And it's over, because even the whole idea that Israel has to do something about Iran is absurd, because they can't do it without the United States. Simply can't do it.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, I don't believe our military, as it currently is constructed, can go in again and fight another war with disastrous consequences as we did in Iran and Afghanistan. I don't think we can do it. This gentleman, David Levy, who I mentioned, in his talk, his interview, said, and he acknowledged, Israel is a nuclear-armed power.
Yes, it is.
So if they are nuclear power, yet they don't want Iran to be a nuclear power, and you have the balance of mutually assured destruction. They want to try to take out the Iranian nuclear, which is very difficult to do because they're so far underground. But again, they can't do it without the United States. And do we want to be drawn into a war, another war, in that area? For what purpose?
Yeah, for what purpose?
For what purpose? So I think a lot of interesting things are happening. I hope we're not drawn into a war. And I think certainly in Ukraine, it's very clear that Ukraine is not going to beat Russia, and they are losing, despite what people say about these. I actually look at the maps. There are maps from Google Earth that show the location of the Russians and the Ukrainians. Every little, I'll call it a pimple that occurs, the Ukrainians are able to penetrate an area that's held by the Russians is a big deal. But you look at the areas the Russians control, there's just no way, and it's a losing effort. And I think that Trump is going to find a way to gracefully get us out of that, withdraw, and end that whole thing.
I certainly hope so, Dick.
Well, it's a shame.
I mean, it's not good for anybody.
Certainly not the Ukrainians.
Not any nation, not any group of people.
Right.
And it just frustrates me to no end that that part of the world, by and large, just can't learn how to live with each other in peace.
Well, is it our job to solve that problem for them? See, this is the whole issue of, are we the superpower that's going to go around the whole world and straighten out everybody's problems? Are we prepared to do that? Do we have the ability? Our national debt, John, is staggering.
Yes, it is.
And the interest on the debt is going to be is all approaching, if it has not already exceeded, $1 trillion a year, just the interest. And China is unloading the investments it made in our bonds. Other countries are unloading them. This is not a good situation.
Not at all.
It's like we're throwing this money, we're spending money, but we don't have it. It's almost like the state of Rhode Island, which we should be talking about a little bit. This is state of the state, but we had a discussion with our previous guest about the governor's proposed budget in excess of $14 billion.
Well, Dick, I'm glad you're saying that because we're running close to running out of time, but we have time yet. Maybe we should talk a little bit about what's going on here at home.
Sure. I think we've had guests on this program a number of times on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, as we went through this whole COVID thing and the money. I call it COVID cash. Of course, that's not the technical term, but we were getting money.
Everyone understands that.
So we were getting all this. It was a windfall.
Yes,
right?
it was.
And yet the money is now drying up, and yet the budget cannot be cut. Once government starts spending money, it's very difficult for them to stop. And I was listening the other night on the news, and there was homeless advocates complaining that they don't have enough money, that the number of homeless have increased, and that they don't. So all these special interest groups are coming out and holding out their hands and saying, we need more money.
Yes, indeed.
That's not a way to control the budget or get it back down to the level somewhere around this COVID money. I mean, we can't simply keep borrowing money at the state level the way we do. People seem to, almost all the bond issues that are on
they all get passed.
They all get passed.
They all get passed.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay. But each of those bond issues has to be repaid at some point and does have carrying costs associated with it.
Yes, indeed. And I'm not so sure that the average Rhode Islander has an understanding of, when we pass these bond bills, how is that going to affect our pocketbook?
Well,
we don't seem to be thinking about that.
No. It sounds like a good project, and many of them are probably worthwhile.
Of course they are.
One of the things that really just I can't get across my mind is the governor coming out in this disaster called Rhode Island Bridges.
Yes.
He's saying that probably 650 or 700,000 Rhode Islanders' information has been compromised. I'm thinking, you're talking about 65 to 70% of the state. Can that many people be getting a handout from the state? 70%, 7 out of 10 Rhode Islanders are getting a handout from the state? Can't be. There's something wrong with this whole calculation.
Well, I'm not so sure that all are dependent. Many of those accounts are for health insurance. Now, to what extent?
It's still a subsidy.
Yeah, it is a subsidy. But to what extent are people actually getting money from that? I don't know, Dick.
Well, the subsidy means that somebody's got to be subsidizing it.
Where's the money coming from?
Where's it coming from? You're getting it as a form of a handout in a way, because you're saying I can't afford health care, and the state's saying, okay, we'll pay part of it. Yeah. That's a handout. And that's not a healthy situation.
It's a mind-boggling figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Dick. Well, we have maybe 3 minutes or so, Dick.
Time flies, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, it really does. Let's finish off with the state of Rhode Island, as we've already begun, because there's many, many things that are going on here that I think it would be helpful to call to the attention of our viewers. So you pick the ones that you want to chat for the remaining time that we have.
Well, I think there's a couple of concerns we have. One is certainly the Washington Bridge situation, which seems to be a real boondoggle. No one wants to step up and take responsibility for it. Instead, we're going to try to sue the guys that built the bridge, the companies that built the bridge. The very companies we need to build a new bridge, we're going to sue them. And I think that's going to be, I don't know why anybody would want to.
And that's why none of them bidded for the first run of bidding.
And then the ironic thing is the governor and the director of transportation come out and said, well, we really didn't think anybody was going to respond to the request for proposal. But anyway, we have that. We have the fact that the courts have said the toll gantries for trucks has to be applied to both residential trucks and out-of-state trucks.
Yeah. Even Steven.
Even Steven. And it has to be turned on. And I still think the people that predicted that eventually it's going to apply to passenger vehicles is only a matter of time, because the state is scrambling for revenue any way they can find it. The governor has said, well, we want to impose a registration, like a surtax on electric vehicles. Everybody's saying, oh yeah, that's the way to go. Everybody wants to have electric vehicles, but yet we're going to lose money on the gasoline tax, so therefore they have to be burdened with some special registration fee every year. So what's the trade-off? I mean, I'm
scratching my head.
I know. It's like nobody seems to be able to explain this stuff, and yet we're going pell-mell down these roads and trying to do all this stuff.
Yes, indeed. It's a big problem. Half a minute, Dick, remaining.
Half a minute. Well, all I can say is that we're going for some interesting days in the legislature. We talked about some of them with our previous guest, Representative Jason Knight. We hope to have other guests come on. We hope to have the minority leaders of the House and the Senate come on in a future program. Be interesting to get their perspective on what's going on. And I'm sure we are going to have some other very interesting guests going forward.
We're looking forward to it, Dick. And thank you so much. And thank our viewers for watching this program. And please join us again next time for the next edition of State of the State.